Well, first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming on. I think, correct me if I'm not wrong, but you have a book that didn't you co-wrote that book with Viveka, and I think I've interviewed her. I've interviewed her a couple times, in fact. But so it's good to have the other half of the duo there. Tell us, just give us a little background on you, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, I did co-write the Essential Carnivore Diet cookbook with Viveka, which was a really cool partnership. We were tackling some information from totally different backgrounds. So I come from, well, my background is private chef. So I started as a private chef. My dad's owned restaurants all over Salt Lake and Portland, Oregon. And so I grew up chefing with him, and I moved into private chefing. I became an athlete myself, and then my husband and I own a very private gym in Salt Lake City, Utah. We train athletes. We've had the Atlanta Braves in. We have worked with quite a few actors from DC Films. So I've chefed on Justice League, for Superman, which was really cool. Worked with Henry Cavill. And then I'm kind of moving into the realm of writing and creating content. So this was actually my first book that I co-wrote with Viveka. So
Very nice. And so you say you become an athlete. What kind of are you? I think I've seen you do CrossFit type stuff. Or what kind of athlete are you?
yeah, so I started out as a competitive distance runner. So I ran cross country through school. And then I moved into racing, specifically half marathon, it was fun while it lasted. I was so skinny and so thin, and I just wanted a little bit more muscle to me. I'm 5'8". I'm very tall. I'm long. I was 116 pounds, and I knew that I just was not healthy anymore. So I moved into weightlifting and actually went through the process of fixing my metabolism from just running myself to almost to death. I found CrossFit and I loved it. So I've been competing in CrossFit off and on for the past 6 years, which has been really fun.
Yeah, I think, and I know this might maybe upset some people, but I think possibly, particularly as a kid, if you take up cross country, and I did that I ran cross country in, I think from 6th grade through my freshman year in high school, skinny
Mhm.
as could be. And that's probably one of the ways to probably ensure your athletic potential is compromised as a kid, because it just pulls all the muscle off you. And I've seen, I can't remember, Mike, I think it was Mike Boyle, I think the trainer, that said that's the worst thing you could possibly do as a kid is to take up cross country. And we do see all these runners that, you look at most successful marathon runners, and the first thing you're going to notice is they don't have a lot of muscle on them. They're just skin and bones typically. And it helps with that performance for sure, but gosh, it's tough to do. But so you wanted more muscle, and then obviously you've kind of put your foot in the carnivore sphere, at least to some degree. You wrote the cookbook, and so I assume, did you have a dietary shift somewhere in there between the distance running and the CrossFit, and how did that evolve?
I did. So I I I'm trying to think of when my last big race was. So I stopped racing in 2013. And just to throw another wrench in the game, I was vegan on top of my distance running. And I don't know why those two kind of go hand in hand, but there's so many people in the community that I work in that, play around with the vegan diet on top of the distance running, which is like a double whammy for your long-term health. So I was vegan for 8 years, and I was so injured all the time. I was lethargic. I finally went and got blood work done, and my doctor at age 24 was like, "You're premenopausal. You're not in a healthy hormonal range. Your triglycerides are all over the place. You need to shift something with your diet." And I could tell, like, the musculature in my back was compromised in a big way. And so I started to implement more animal products back in. Wasn't carnivore yet. And so there was a long period of time in there where, I was trying to fix my metabolism from running, which was a long process. I had to go through the process of, feeding, overfeeding, refeeding my body, just so that I could fix my metabolism from years and years of running on super low calorie and low nutrition. And so I took about 4 years to just refeed with animal products, the best that I possibly knew how to do at the time. This was all just a learning process for me. And about 2 years ago, I landed on the carnivore diet, which was really cool. And, from a standpoint of, I'm an outsider looking into the community. I still work with quite a few clients who are not carnivore. It's been really cool to implement the diet and see some of these really cool changes, like huge life-changing issues that I've seen kind of resolve through the carnivore diet, including myself. Like I started competing in CrossFit in 2016 at an international level. So I was competing and doing some of these big, what would have been regional competitions before CrossFit changed. And now we have all of these sanctioned events. And I lost my cycle. I was very, very lean, which, I didn't mind. I didn't mind being lean. But I knew something was going on if I wasn't having my cycle. And I see this a lot with female athletes. And within 2 months of eating really strict carnivore and really focusing on like adding in organ meats and just nutrition on a deeper level, all of that stuff started to come back. My eyelashes started to become really thick, and my hair was growing like crazy, and I started having my cycle again, which is huge for female in sport. So I could tell I was just starting to heal on a totally different level that I thought that I wouldn't get that back again. So yeah, it was huge, life-changing for me.
All right, this is gonna be a total non sequitur, but you got a shirt that says defend analog. What's that about? Just
Yeah.
out of curiosity.
This is this is my husband's company. So my husband has a publishing company and a podcast called Nonprofit. And so this is his shirt.
Okay, so no meaning behind, I guess the opposite of analog might be digital. I'm just wondering what the message was there.
Yeah, so they own a publishing company, and they write books, and this was one of their shirts that they put out. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Some cool
So
stuff.
So I mean, as like as a chef, and I've got a copy of the book, and it's a great book that you guys have.
Thank you.
How I mean, because a lot of people will say, a meat-based diet is so boring. It's nothing, you're gonna eat the same thing. But the reality of that, if you're willing to do it, and I honestly sometimes I'm a little lazy. I mean, I find that salt and fire of some sort of heating device is generally what I need. But talk about the variety of different options on a meat-based diet, so to speak.
Different options that I eat on a regular basis.
Well, I mean, not just you, but I mean, because you wrote an entire cookbook, which has, literally, hundreds of different options for people. And because many people are like, well, it's, because some people restrict their diet, ground beef, and I'm Brit's here eating ground beef and bacon for 99.99% of his meals. And some people are a little more, but obviously as a professionally trained chef, I mean, you've got probably more cook. I mean, I would say it's fair to say you have more skills in the kitchen than the average person does. So what can you do with different cuts of meat and different types of things that are interesting?
So we got a smoker about a year ago, and so we've been smoking a lot. I've kind of moved away from chicken. I do still implement it, and we can talk a little bit more about that. It's not my favorite meat, just because it's not as nutritionally dense as as red meat. But we eat a lot of game meat. I push game meat. I think it's a lot more nutritionally dense than, just going to the store and buying a conventional steak. But we do a lot of New York strips. That's one of my favorites. We also eat a lot of raw, like a lot of sashimi, a lot of tuna, just with salt and a little squeeze of lime. That's like been a summer favorite. A lot of roasts, which, we just either throw in our oven or throw in the crock pot or the pressure cooker, which I know seems super, super lazy for a chef, but, working with a lot of clients that, want to do a diet like Carnivore Diet, I think that it's super important to teach people how to meal prep so that it is easy, so it can be long-term. So super simple, super easy meals like that. Let's see, I got into making my own sausage. So, ground bison with a little bit of animal fat. That's been fun. They work really well in the freezer. They're kind of time consuming to make, but if you can make a big batch of them and throw them in the freezer, those are awesome. You can throw them in with eggs in the morning. So, but if I'm chefing for a client, by the time I started chefing for Henry Cavill on Justice League, I hadn't found the Carnivore Diet yet. And I wish that I would, because that would have been perfect for like prepping him for his shirtless scene. I wish I could have incorporated that at the time. So.
Yeah, I'm just talking about food prep and consumption. I honestly, for me, if I can eat it in 2 minutes, I don't want to spend an hour making it. That's for I'm kind of maximum consumption for minimum time. I think that's how it works for me. But let me ask you. So back to the CrossFit and the athletic stuff, because I've seen your Instagram. You're very much in shape. And so how has the shift to a carnivore diet impacted your capacity to train and work out to recover? You said you're injured all the time on a vegan diet. How's it different now?
So one thing that I'll have to mention is it took me a little bit of time to kind of say, okay, I'm going to do the diet strict. I think that was fair. I needed to be able to do the diet strict to be able to write the book. And I felt like that was fair for my readers. If I went through a very strict version of the diet and still was doing my normal things, still training the way that I train. And it was really tough for me to become a little bit more fat adapted, because I was coming from a typical, very unhealthy, super high carbohydrate CrossFit style diet. I was eating 250 grams of carbs a day and training, like I was prepping for competition. And so I twisted my ankle about a year and a half ago. And I thought this was a really good time to start implementing the diet. I'm injured. I'm not training to compete right now. And so I just went full force into the diet, super strict. And I started playing around with, how I felt. I could still do some things in the gym. I just was staying off of my left ankle. So I could still even get on the bike and pedal and see how I felt with some, breathing and endurance stuff. But I will have to say that even after 3 months, my top end VO2 max work was not the same. Just tapping into the higher glycolytic things with the time duration that I was testing. I couldn't figure it out at first. And I feel like I've been able to find a way to do it and still get my numbers back with the carnivore diet. But for a very long time, I just couldn't get adapted to the fat, or I just didn't have the glycogen stores on board to do what I wanted to do with my sport. But I stuck with it, and I still trained, lifting weights. I felt great. Longer efforts, I felt really good on fat, high fat. But I started to find that if I placed leaner meats and kind of overdid it with the lean meats, instead of eating a steak right after a workout, I would eat like fish and eggs and chicken, some of the leaner meats right after my workout, I felt like I could get away with a little bit more than if I ate some of the fatty meats right after, right before a training session. So that's kind of one of the ways that I worked around it. And now I've kind of competed here and there a little bit. You know, the competitions are starting to open up again. So I did start adding in fruit around events. So if I was prepping for a competition, I'd add some fruit. And the really cool thing about it is, instead of coming back to 250 grams of carbohydrates, I was getting away with really lean meats and like 15 grams of carbs, which is really, really cool for long term. You know, I'm 37, so this is kind of supposed to be my last year of competing. At least I told myself that. And so now I have to start looking at long-term health. And I don't think that it's healthy to eat that many carbohydrates. Like, you're just in a constant insulin cycle. It's not good for it's not good for your body to constantly be tapping into that, you know. And so that's one of the things that I've taught my community. You know, some of the athletes that I work with is, now you have to start thinking about your system, you know, like long term. And so that's kind of how I've gotten away with competing in my sport, with sticking to a carnivore diet. So the rest of my day looks really strict carnivore, and then right around training, I'll have a little bit of like full fat yogurt and blueberries. And I feel like I'm doing just fine. I've competed at a high level and gotten away with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, Dana's asking about what do you mean by gotta get away with. You know, I think she says she's eating a lot of carbs for a lifetime already. But I mean, and I think that's an important thing, that you know, you realize what things impact you how, and you know, and like I said, um, there does seem to be, as people get older, you know, they seem to have less tolerance for some of these things, and you know, you can mitigate that somewhat with exercise for sure. So did you find, you know, because I think we find this is, and this is the interesting thing I think about this community, there's certainly a lot of people within this community that do a carnivore meat-based diet, but then they'll add a few things in and here and there, and how they determine what works for them, what doesn't. You know, some people would add the blueberries, and it would be a disaster for them for whatever reason. It may, because it might lead to other things, or they might just have a problem with the blueberries themselves, and other people don't. And that's something I think is neat. How do you, so let's just double more in your diet. So like, let's say, I mean, you know, some training days in CrossFit are going to be different than others. I mean, there's strength focused days, there's going to be metcons, there's going to be different things. How do you, you know, what, 3 meals a day, 2 meals a day, what does it typically look like for you?
So on most days, if I'm just training in my gym and, you know, it's not a super competitive day, because obviously not every day I'm racing or competing with my, you know, some of my team members that I like really push it with, I can get away with, you know, some eggs and a steak that day. I usually eat twice a day. So I'll have something right after training, and that meal is usually a little bit more lean. And then at night, I usually always have red meat. So I incorporate red meat back in. If I had a heavy training day the day before, I might have like some leftover flank steak during the day, but I usually keep right around training pretty lean, and then refeed all of those fats and more nutritionally dense meats in the evening. And I fast, like, you know, if I'm just doing a normal training session at 9 a.m., I'll usually fast and eat after that. And I feel totally fine. So the times when I'm adding in a little bit of blueberries, that's really if, you know, after a competitive class, our Friday night class is usually fairly competitive. And so most of my week is pretty strict.
Yeah, and so let me ask you, as far as you know, some of the other stuff that you do with around creating content, and you talk about the clients you have. Are you still seeing? Are you still doing, I guess, cooking for different people, or what are you doing typically now?
Right now, I have a full clientele for nutrition, so I'm working with quite a few athletes that are also competing, or you know, trying to lose weight, or girls that are trying to put on weight because they come from sport. They need to be a certain weight for sport. So most of what I'm doing right now is working as a nutrition coach, and then I'm actually writing another book about female in sport. So we're tackling from um, the psychological side of sport, and also, what people get out of competition, and what people get out of training hard and putting themselves through hard efforts. So that's a really cool project that I'm working on next. And then I have another cookbook in the works right now, that will be all big game. So cooking with big game, and it's pretty carnivore. I'm trying to think of what we've added in that's not carnivore. I'm co-writing that with a hunter, Trevor Thompson, and he's not strict carnivore, but so I think that some of his recipes will be, they'll add herbs or something like that in it, but most of the stuff is pretty carnivore, just how to grill meats and how to cook with different cuts of game, which can be finicky. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And hopefully both of those projects will be wrapped up by the end of the year.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I was going to comment. I think the game meat stuff may become more and more relevant if they try to limit beef consumption. Be people out there shooting squirrels and rabbits and raccoons and whatever you can get a hold of, I think. There's a question
Absolutely.
from Dan asking about, do you deal with any menopausal women with weight loss? Do you have a different strategy for them? How do you go about that if you do indeed see those folks?
We usually focus on deeper nutrition. It depends on the client. Sometimes I can push the carnivore, which, in this particular situation, it is really good for hormonal balancing. The carnivore diet would be deeper nutrition, so lots of organ meats. Isn't um, if someone isn't super interested in eating organ meat, because one, it can be a little bit harder to find, and two, it's for some people not super palatable. But I usually do try to push the organ meats. Sometimes I'll have people just go on and order ancestral supplements. But I've found that that's a good way to explore deeper nutrition. And then just getting in enough really good grass-fed omega-3 fat sources. So the hormonal thing is interesting, because sometimes my clients will come to me with blood work, and every single person is so different. So we kind of have to tackle it, individual for every individual client. But yeah, focusing on that deeper level of nutrition has been usually where we start first.
Yeah, and then Dan is further asking clarification. Do you opt more in those particular clients for a higher fat approach, a ketogenic approach, or a higher sort of protein, leaner meat approach? Or have you seen different ones?
Usually, I usually go for a higher fat, and which is super easy on carnivore diet, but obviously the types of fat matter. I wouldn't say, go for a bunch of chicken. Definitely like the grass-fed steaks would be the realm that I would push. And fatty fish as well, but I would probably stick to a higher fat standpoint.
All right, and then so what's some of what's your favorite thing to eat right now? I mean, I'm sure it changes from time to time. What's your favorite thing to eat currently?
Um, we've been eating a lot of flank steak. We'll stick it on our Traeger and smoke it, so we get the really smoky, good flavor, and then we'll bump up the heat and kind of crisp it up a little bit. But I've been doing a lot of flank steak with just truffle salt, which is awesome. Like I could eat that every day. So that's probably my number one favorite meal right now.
Yeah, I actually had flank steak for dinner last night, if I'm not mistaken. So I think think it was a flank steak. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, exactly. I know it was. But yeah, I mean, it is a good one. It is something that, you find these cuts. And I prepared it in a sous vide first, and then I went and seared it at a high heat and threw some salt on there. And
Yeah.
it was pretty darn good. But do you find, so you mentioned earlier something about chicken. You don't really eat chicken much, or what was the story on that?
So, having people transition over into the carnivore diet, I do hear a lot of digestion issues, at least from my clients, or maybe I shouldn't say issues, but people are nervous about digestion or digesting so much red meat, which, you probably have heard the opposite end of, like, my digestion is so much better now, which, eventually people do get there. And so I see people start the diet with chicken, like a lot of lean meats. And um, it's just such a low nutrition um, meat. And obviously you can get some organic, small farm chicken, and it can be a little bit better. But, with a diet that's so, it's so simple, I think going for the best bang for your buck is probably what I would suggest, which is red meat. Go for the red meat. It has the most nutritional value. And so, where I still eat chicken, like I mentioned, around training, because I feel like I have a little bit more recovery value with the chicken or the leaner meat after training. I do push people towards red meat. The more red meat that they can handle in their diet, the better. And I think that the faster you can get used to breaking down the red meat, because those stomach enzymes and, the bacteria in your stomach will come. If you don't have it yet, it will come if you push the red meat. I think that that's the best way to stay healthy on the diet, rather than, chicken. Correct me if I'm wrong. Going a couple days on like some of the leaner meats, and I don't know if you've even played around with that, I start to find that I crave sweets. Like I crave sugar if I do like 2 days of leaner meats, and I don't throw back in red meat. And so that's another reason why, I think if you can get red meat in at least once a day, go for it rather than chicken.
Yeah, I mean, I play around with, if I want to get really lean, I'll play with lean meats, but I'll cycle back in fats periodically. I've talked about that on numerous occasions. Like we have this entire
Yeah.
carnivore shred guide program, which is kind of based a little bit around that. But yeah, I mean, it is, if you got to get energy from somewhere, and lean protein is not the best place to get energy. I mean, it's great for, building blocks and so on and so forth. But when it comes to fueling your body, you're going to need either fat or carbohydrates. And so if you're not giving yourself the fat, you're going to crave the carbs. And if you eat the carbs, if you can control yourself, fine. If you can't, you may end up, on a box of chocolate later, and a half pint of, half a gallon of ice cream down the road. And so, figure out how to do that. I think fat, and the other thing is I mean, it's still a biochemical fact that we require fat and we don't require carbohydrates, even though you can have carbohydrates, to benefit for some people, but for not clearly not for all. And I think it changes with time.
Mm-hmm.
What so since going on a carnivore diet relative to a vegan diet, I mean, do you still have the same people that you ran with in the vegan days that think you're just crazy now, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, 100%. And there was 10 years in between when I was vegan and when I went carnivore. So, it wasn't like this huge drastic switch. I had a lot of other things that I played with in the meantime, trying to keep in vegetables and like tons of salads. And um, I I do still have a very big vegan community here in Salt Lake, because I was vegan for so long, and I had chefed as a vegan chef for a long time in Salt Lake. And so, it's interesting now because everyone's gotten a little bit older, and I think with age, certain things show. You can't get away with being vegan long term. You have to, take care of yourself, and things start to show up, like skin, for example. some of these vegan people that I've seen that have been vegan now for like 15, 20 years, they look old, their skin is aged. They look, that skinny fat look. They don't look athletic and strong. And so I'm grateful that I kind of went the other direction, and I knew that I needed it because I was so tired and so lethargic. But I still talk to a lot of these people. One girl comes into our gym and, she complains about her back hurting all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, you need, you need just a steak, just try it and see how you feel. And if you hate it, go back to the way you were. But I know that she would be sold on it instantly. So.
And you said 10 years, so you're 37. So I guess you just kind of quit when you're about 27 or so. How long did you do it, and what compelled you to want to go vegan back all those years ago?
I think it was kind of, I started working, I had been chefing with my dad. There was a need for vegan. So it was a kind of a niche new thing, at least in Salt Lake. And I wanted to kind of tackle the gluten-free and the vegan industry from a chefing standpoint. And, I wanted to learn how to make vegan gluten-free wedding cakes at the time. And so, I kind of tackled it from a knowledge standpoint of, I want to be able to cater to people that are diving into this. And I just kind of got engulfed in it just from, trying to figure out how to do it. And the longer that I was vegan, the harder it was to go back. And I think that I really needed to be competitive in my sport before I could acknowledge that I needed a change. Again, I was starting to race at a pretty high level, and I was exhausted. I mean, I can't even imagine going back to that and doing what I do now. And so, I think it was more of, I wanted to learn how to do it so that I could cater to it and have kind of a niche on the market. And I felt like I was loved in my community for that, which is a weird reason for doing it, but it was what it was. And the one thing that it did teach me is I could pay attention to labels. Like, I knew what was in everything. I knew how to measure things. I knew, what interesting ingredients were in vegan foods. And now I'm like, gosh, that stuff is so silly. Just eat a steak. Simplify it even more. But, I think that that's why I stayed vegan for so long was, I was the person that the vegan community would come to for certain things. So, like wedding cakes and, really good vegan meals put together, at a restaurant, which was different at the time. There wasn't a lot of vegan choices. So.
What was so the transition from veganism to back to eating meat again, or I'll never stop? How did that work? What was the first thing you had? Was there some internal strife that occurred to make that change? How did that happen?
So I started to research about it, and I started to research why my blood work was so off, because I started having a really weird, like really high estrogen levels, and my mom had cancer. My mom just passed away last year of brain cancer, and my blood work profile started to look the way that her blood work profile looked like, and that freaked me out beyond belief. And so, it was kind of to the point where if nutritionally I could make some changes, I'm going to figure out how to do it. And so I started researching about it, and I was up in Park City, right above Salt Lake, running one day, and the farmer's market was going, and I walked past this guy that had wild caught halibut. And I'm like, you know what? I am going to get some halibut. That seems really non-invasive. And I'm just going to go home and grill it up and have halibut. And if I hate it, then I'm going to go back to vegan. And I felt like I just got a vitamin B shot. Like, I started eating the halibut. I felt really good. I had this burst of energy. I couldn't sleep that night. And so I was sold on it from that. Like, I must have been so depleted that just that piece of halibut like brought me back to life. And so I played around with bison. Like red chicken didn't sound appetizing to me at the time. I don't know if it was like a texture thing, but I just was really, really craving red meat. So I got a bison roast. I made a bison roast, and it was really hard for me to digest. I had some stomach issues with it, but like the cravings, I just craved it so much that, you know, that's like all I wanted at the time. So that was kind of my first meal that I had that kind of switched me, was the halibut and then the bison. And after I had the halibut, I I knew that this was something that I needed for, you know, turning my health around. So I was pretty sold on it after that.
And did you, I mean, was this something you kind of announced to your community very quickly, or did you kind of just keep it quiet for a while? I know a lot of people kind of, they kind of don't say anything for a while.
Um, my community knew about it, and the funny thing is I lost a lot of friends eating meat, which I think is so absurd. It was very political at the time, which I still think it is. I get so many comments on my Instagram from vegan writers, like, how could you do this? You're a terrorist to your community. And I'm like, man, I'm just putting out content that I know is true for myself in hopes that it'll help someone else out, the same as what you think that you're doing. You know, the only difference is I'm not attacking you on any kind of level. I don't care if you eat meat or not, you know, more meat for me. So yeah, it was interesting. The community was, you know, not very happy about it, but I had felt so good. And I think, you know, health is so individual that, you know, I didn't care at that point. People started to come around later as they started making those decisions for themselves. So
Yeah, and do you find that, you know, because you said you're still in the community, you're still in contact with some of the people that you knew from years ago.
mm.
Do you find many of these vegans are now switching over, or have you been the cause of their I guess leaving that lifestyle? Some people would criticize you for that, but has that happened?
A couple have switched over, and I tell people, like, especially people that are coming into my gym, you know, if you're coming into my gym, you're paying me for my information, I'm going to tell you my honest opinion. And, you know, I also say no one could have told me anything different. I had to find out for myself. You know, don't take my word for it. Like, if you are interested in playing around with it, or, you know, feeling better, like, this is the route that I went, try it and see how you feel. Like, just test it out and see how you feel. So, you know, and obviously with the book, I think people know my standpoint now. So, you know, I've actually had more people reach out, wanting information, like, you know, what was the first thing that you had? How did you feel after? Did you feel guilty? And I think it's more from a they want to learn as well standpoint at this point. So
Was there a contrast, because you mentioned you spent time in Portland, and then you spent time and you're now in Salt Lake City, and those two cities I think maybe are different demographically and maybe even politically. Maybe I think I'm correct on that. But do you find a difference in the food culture in the two cities?
um, absolutely. Utah is, you know, we do have a little vegan community here, but we're pretty meat based. We have a lot of hunters here, you know, hunters that are really proud of, you know, proud of their elk meat. They want to hold on to it because they know how valuable it is. Um, and we also have a lot of hunters here that are, you know, really, they care about the land. They are very humane hunters. You know, they're not these big macho guys that, you know, brag about their kill. It's like, look, this is how I feed my family. This is how I keep my family healthy. And the vegan community in Portland is it's huge. You know, they're very political about it, and I think that that's, you know, Portland in general, they're very political about their views, which is, I think, is fine. but a lot more vegan options there in Portland. My dad has restaurants there. He still offers vegan options on his menus. So yeah, it is very different. And I actually lived in London as well, where, the community is, they have a huge vegan following there, but huge vegetarian following. It's hard to go to a restaurant and just order a steak. They look at you like you're crazy. So, it's definitely different parts of the world. But I feel pretty lucky to live in Utah because, so many of my friends hunt. It's very meat heavy here.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess obviously with Portland, I mean, I would assume seafood would have been more plentiful there. Clearly, I just moved up to Washington State. I'm actually sitting on an island right now. There's all kinds of different
Oh,
seafood,
awesome.
particularly shellfish, crab, and mussels and clams and that stuff around there. So I'm sure that'll make its way into my diet a little more frequently than it was other
Yeah.
times. But with regard to do you see, I think we're seeing clearly increases in prices on not just meat, but everything's going up. Gas prices up, meat prices
Mhm.
are up, lumber prices are up, everything's up. Home prices are up. So a lot of people are being stretched thin right now. I mean, for the home cook, what would you say, because, a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford the really higher end, the top end prime cuts of meat or the ribeyes or stuff like that. What do you think is some things that are essential for the average person to be familiar with or to have to make maybe these less expensive cuts um, better?
Um, Roasts. I think roasts are great. And if you have the time to slow roast a cut, I think that that's a pretty inexpensive cut that I feel like I push people that I'm helping meal prep on Carnivore Diet towards. Um, Also, a lot of bone broth. Bone broth is super simple. Bone marrow is super inexpensive. Most butchers will sell you quite a few like soup bones for pretty inexpensive. Um, but also not to disregard eggs. Eggs are really an inexpensive way to get in proteins and really healthy fats. And so, that's usually a really great snack that, people can hard boiled eggs or make eggs. Ground beef is awesome. Ground beef is a little bit cheaper. You can usually find, someone said raw eggs. You can definitely find, some pretty inexpensive, high quality ground beef and eggs. So those are kind of my choices. But, I've also heard from a lot of people in my community that once they cut out all of the condiments and all of the vegetables, they found that it was actually a lot less expensive eating carnivore. So maybe not if you're eating out quite a bit, but I think if you're prepping for yourself, you can get away with, eating carnivore on a lower budget. And that might be
Yeah, I mean,
interesting for a post.
yeah, you certainly can do a relatively inexpensive carnivore diet. People are pointing to ground beef. Ground beef, even here, I think I can still see it for $3-4 a pound, which is, I mean, that's, you could, average person eat 2 pounds a day. You're looking at $8 a day potentially, and if you throw eggs in
Yeah.
there, you throw some eggs in there, you might even bring that cost down even more. And so I think that's something that, at least in the United States, most people can afford. Maybe different in other parts of the world, but I can speak to that for sure. Do you find that, uh, when you go strict carnivore versus fruit, do you notice any difference, positive, negative, outside of athletic performance?
Yeah. And I think the biggest will be I feel really balanced emotionally. I sleep really good. I think the only reason to add in a little bit of fruit would be that higher end, and I mean prepping for a competition, which is totally different diet than like me just going to the gym and having fun and lifting weights and train. I can get away with a strict carnivore diet with that. And when I say get away with, I mean, am I going from heat to heat in a competition, like preparing myself to go into the next one? Like, the difference between implementing caffeine or not implementing caffeine. You know, it's a very specific time and place that I would add something like that. And so as soon as competition ends, like, people don't train like they're competing all the time, or at least they probably can't get away with it for very long. So the same thing with adding in fruit. I think sleep is a lot harder. As far as, I sleep really hard. I wear a Whoop band, which I like my Whoop band, but it does definitely track sleep. It shows that I'm in REM sleep really. My percentages are a lot higher when I'm strict carnivore, which is interesting. It goes up by about 12%, which is what I'm tracking right now, which is huge, you know, especially for people that have a hard time sleeping. The main thing that I notice with myself and with my clients is emotionally more level. That's like the number one thing that I've heard reported back, which that's huge, you know, especially right now where, you know, a lot of people are feeling a lot of stress in the world, like with the economy and, you know, the pandemic. I think if you can get a little emotional peace, like, that's 100% worth it.
Yeah, and you see that, you know, just the people that are suffering from anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues is just going up and up and up and up. You know, as our diet quality goes down and down, our mental health issues go up and up and up. And we see so many people that have, you know, issues with anger and just, you know, it's kind of scary to be, you know, so many people are so on edge right now. And it's just like, just eat a steak, you know, gosh, chill out, have a little fat in your diet, and you feel a lot better. Um,
Absolutely.
we're just almost out of our hour of time. Is there anything else you'd like to share, just conceptually, that people should know? That I want to make sure we get where to find you and all those types of things, social media, book type stuff. But anything else you want to, any other concept you want to address?
I think the main thing is, even if you are using carnivore just to go in and heal your gut, you know, just go in and heal your gut, like, you'll find so much relief as far as anxiety goes with just going in and letting the diet heal your gut, even if you can commit to like 1 month, which is funny. When I started doing this diet, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it 1 month. My husband and I were, you know, oh, we can commit to 1 month. And then we stayed on it, you know, until now. So I think if you're dabbling or you want to try it out, try it for 1 month and see how you feel after the 1 month. People can find me on my Instagram. I answer quite a few questions there. My Instagram handle is shutupEAT. And also, I don't dabble on Facebook too much. I do have a presence there, but mostly I live on Instagram. And then my website is shutupWORK.com. So that's where you can find my book and some of my training. So yeah, that's where people can find me.
I like that. Shut up, just shut up and eat. Yeah, you know, I
Yeah.
love shut up and eat, just get it done. All right. Well, Erin, it's been a pleasure. Good luck to you. Good luck with you with the next book. Hopefully people will check out your first book. I have a copy of it. It's got some great recipes in there. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing, and you know, look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, folks, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'll see you guys back tomorrow. You guys take care. Bye-bye now.